Welcome back, tribe. I have one here from the Young Turds. Just kidding. Young Turks. They're saying right-wingers are fighting to end no-fault divorce. I haven't seen this. What's their take on this?
Fault divorce is very, very bad.
But I think the reform to no-fault divorce is far simpler. It should be reformed by simply ceasing to exist. Marriage is much more than a contract. It's a covenant.
There are a lot of problems with the current legal structure of marriage. I agree with that critique of the current legal structure of marriage. No-fault divorce is one of the worst things that ever happened to Western civilization.
I think she's entitled to nothing during these proceedings. And I think the problem is no-fault divorce.
I still believe that children need a mom and a dad and that divorce is horrible. But in today's legal system, my beliefs don't matter.
We got to get rid of no-fault divorce.
Well, Tim Pool, you might be getting your wish because there are Republican lawmakers who are literally working on that type of policy as we speak. So conservative lawmakers in multiple states and on a national level are considering attempts to eliminate or restrict divorces in cases where fault cannot be proven. Right now, laws exist on or in all 50 states that allows people to end a marriage without having to prove that someone in that marriage did something wrong, like cheating or domestic abuse. The socially conservative, though, and often religious members of society have a different idea, right? So right-wing opponents of such laws are arguing that this deprives men of due process and it hurts families. In reality, oftentimes, couples that want a divorce don't want to accuse each other of terrible things. They just want to part ways and be done with it. And I don't really see how it's beneficial for society to force two individuals who no longer want to be in a marriage to continue being in a marriage.
How was I going to guess that she's going to somehow argue to keep no-fault divorces? Yes, because those are the issues of people's problems not being seen and making it harder for them to separate. No, it's not coming home and watching the pool boy smash out your wife and you worked your entire life and have 3 kids together and she just caught some fifis and didn't know who she was in her mid-40s and wanted to have a fling and then divorces you. And because it's a no-fault divorce state, she's not at fault. You're going to get reamed in the courts. You may lose your kids if they're still young. And your life is now over. She gets half your assets, half your retirement plan, half of everything when she's the one that broke the contract. This is insane. So I have an article. I just texted it to myself. You saw there earlier, but it says conservative U.S. lawmakers, we'll cover this on another, they are pushing for an end to no-fault divorce. It says Republican lawmakers in Louisiana, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Texas have discussed eliminating or increasing restrictions on no-fault marriages. Thank the Lord. They're finally moving. Has the voter base of young disgruntled men, or just men in general, not even young, just all men disgruntled with the horrendous decline in marriages, children, and all the other metrics that are terrible for relationships. The court biases, are those coming up next? I mean, what else? If we're discussing no-fault divorces now, has the ball started rolling? Are we going to start discussing things like alimony as well? Child support as well? It seems like, boys, the pendulum is swinging back a little bit. We'll see.
Living under the same roof and being miserable with one another. But nonetheless, many of you...
So don't get married willy-nilly. This is a contract for life. That means you have done the due diligence and vetted your partner thoroughly. And this is the person you're going to decide to spend the rest of your life with. You know what you can do? Not get married then and just live under the same house. Why are you getting married, saying those vows out loud, most likely in a church, if you have no intention of staying with that person for the rest of your life? Does it make any goddamn sense? Oh, it makes it easier to divorce. How about you just don't get married anyway if you don't believe in the sanctity in the vows? Idiot.
You have already heard claims from conservatives like Tim Pool who think that it's a bad idea to allow people to have these no-fault divorces. And you're about to hear more. Let's watch.
What we're talking about in the American divorce regime is called no-fault divorce. And no-fault divorce is, one, a contradiction in terms. You can't get it. You can't break a contract if there's no fault of anyone. And two, it's horrific for children and it's horrific for the spouses.
Marriage is much more than a contract. It's a covenant. To truly go your own way, alone and isolated, is to give up on your duty, your legacy, your ancestors, your bloodline, your civilization, your happiness.
Marriage is a commitment. That commitment is lifelong. There should actually have to be a really, really, really good reason.
And I like that they're fighting for marriage and fighting for having children and all that. And it's great. Every single man wants to be the head of his own household, lead his own family, have his own children, his own legacy, live on when he passes on. But a lot of men have completely drawn the line at change the laws and then we can talk about it. Change the biases in courts, then we can talk about it. Change the fact that she can take my kids from me by default and we can then talk about it. Until those things get changed, I will either A, go my own way, or B, go overseas, or C, not play the game at all. That's essentially the three options today that men are choosing from. It's causing economic damage. America's losing her hegemony. Because how the fuck do you project power when your population is in steep decline, when men and women don't like each other, when nobody's producing kids, nobody will be manning the guns, nobody's manning the drones. Oh, the AI will do everything. You still need boots on the ground. Can't invade a country with just machines. Not yet, at least, until we build Terminators. But what if they turn on us? Who knows what the future holds? You still need people to occupy land if you want to take it over. You still need people to defend it. You still need people to make the bombs. Man the machines that make the bombs. Repair the machines that need to machine the bombs. Hands are still needed on deck in order for society to function. What happens when a sizable portion of that population starts decreasing, but your enemies are increasing? It doesn't bode well. History has taught us that.
Why you are divorcing, and that's particularly true if you have children, because of course marriage is designed as the fundamental building block of institutional society. It is the place where children are reared. It is the place where you produce children in the first place, and children require stability.
The traditional response to how you fix marriage is divorce is not allowed.
Okay, but
there's rare circumstances where like a guy is threatening to murder and beating his wife and his kids, and infidelity is one of these things.
No-fault divorce is an absolute tragedy. It is the catalyst for every other degenerate marriage and relationship problem that we have in society.
She sounds like a good time. Listen, okay, great. Go ahead and pass laws restricting divorce, and let's see how much the marriage rate drops from what it already is. It's already dropped considerably, but you're going to make it harder for people to divorce. You're going to have more people living under the same roof, having children.
Why is the narrative it's going to be harder to divorce? It's going to be just as easy to divorce as it is today. You just start the paperwork and be done with it. This is just putting the onus on the person who broke the contract that they get nothing for breaking the contract. That if you engage in infidelity, if you engage in some form of fraud, paternal perhaps, that you don't get anything. That's it. No fault and divorce don't go together. If a divorce happened, something is at fault. Now, you can amicably, mutually come together through an understanding and say, you know what? We both fell out of love. Let's get a divorce. Whether no-fault divorces exist or not, doesn't matter. These two people will sign the contract because they're adults legally in the United States and begin the proceedings for a separation. There is nothing stopping you. I don't understand where the narrative of it's going to be harder to get divorced. It's going to be easier, actually, to get divorced. Because if you find someone at fault, you can now enforce it with the state. She broke the contract. He broke the contract. I caught her cheating. I caught him cheating. Freaking pig, animal. He smashed the maid. She smashed the pool boy. And you lose everything. So what happens? Marriages tend to be taken more seriously, and the people in them will be trying harder to keep them intact. Instead of, I'm just going to smash the pool boy. I don't care anymore. There's no consequences, no fault divorce. Now, I better think twice about doing something stupid that'll cause my husband or my wife to divorce me, and I get nothing. All the time spent together, all the years will be nullified, just like I nullified the contract by breaking it. You have access to no assets, no child support, no alimony, period, if you break this contract. And that's how it should be. That's logical. That's in the world today, in society that we have today, where people should have their own agency, their own rights, strong, independent boss babes, don't need no man's money, should be advocating for this exact thing. We don't need men to take care of us. We don't need to be reaming their asses in court and having all this we could take care of ourselves. We make our own money. If I want a divorce from a man, I should be able to walk away, period, and not have to split any assets. How are women not fighting for this no-fault divorce stuff? How are women not saying, well, if it's such a chore, if it's such a burden to be married to a man, well, why don't we have at fault divorces. Because if I catch that dog cheating, I better be able to take him for everything. He shouldn't be able to get nothing from me. I work too hard for my career. Why not? Where are the women fighting for that? That's their angle. That should be their angle, judged based on the arguments they have in society today against men. It's crazy. Only when it benefits them. Selective feminism, eh?
Out of wedlock, which is what conservatives don't want. Like the idea that a couple needs to prove that there's a good reason for them to divorce in order to be able to part ways is ridiculous to me. And this is coming from individuals who purport to want to protect freedom in America. But they're getting involved in literally the most intimate personal decisions that Americans can make about their personal lives. It is insane. In the case of Steven Crowder, by the way, he was bitter after it was exposed that he's pretty abusive to his wife.
Again, that's also a lie in the narrative. Dude, I hate how they do this. I covered that thing with Crowder. I attacked him on just the way he was speaking to his wife and the attitude he was having. It came from a more beta-styled frame. But overall, in general, I'd say that's one of the episodes I made a mistake on, judging him too harshly overall in his marriage. It came out later that his wife was the one setting up that entire clip pretty much. More details about their marriage actually had come out. She turned out to be a nasty person, yada, yada, yada. So when I was judging him, I judged him too harshly. I'll take that one back and say that was a straight up L. The context of the clip that we got was so hyper focused on that exact altercation that I took that at face value and said, here's how from a male versus a female point of view, behaviorally, he should be responding to his wife acting in that manner. Alas, made a mistake judging him on the rest of his marriage and all the other stuff. Whatever I mentioned in the episode, can't even remember. So I'll take the loss on that one. But for her to say that he's abusive, that is this women sticking with women no matter what the facts are, even when it proves that they're the ones at fault. I mean, the Amber Heard trial proved exactly why you shouldn't trust them and take their word at face value. All the other false accusations that have happened throughout the years that have been recanted, that have destroyed men's lives, young men in college, got them kicked off the campus or lost scholarships or have lost contracts with professional organizations, say like the NFL or baseball or whatever else. Men that have had to step down from powerful positions because of an allegation that later is retracted. Yet again, over and over again, we find out that in the world that we live in today, women are treated with kid gloves and men are forced to pay the price and the brunt of the consequences and responsibility for everything in their lives, including the women that they're with. This is why I tell you guys, accountability, finding a woman that has healthy self-esteem, and above all else, self-awareness, is a critical thinker, thinks for themselves, forms their own opinions first, then listens to what everyone else has to say, is uber important in the world we live in today, where propaganda is essentially injected into your brain 24/7. 24/7. This thing is attached to them like surgically to their hands today. And this is all they do, guys. This is it all day. Swiping up. Ha 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 ha. Dopamine. This, do this. Your man ain't shit. This, you deserve all 6 foot, 7, 8 figures, 9 pack, 10-inch hammer. Blah, blah, blah. Never settle on the table. Blah, blah. Dude, it's non-stop. Depression injecting, dopamine burning, trash content. If that's your woman, you're in trouble. And we've seen it from all the dating episodes that we've covered. It doesn't just affect the young women that are also the most vulnerable, but even 60-year-olds are getting on TikTok crying, behaving like children. It completely hijacks your brain and turns you into a freaking NPC. Having a woman that doesn't engage in social media like that, isn't into celebrity culture and worshiping celebrities just because they're famous. Dude, these are signs of low intelligence. You have to vet for this, man. It's not just beauty anymore. It doesn't cut it in our world today. Your woman actually has to be smart. Simply following directions and being a little stepper wife at home isn't going to cut it. Your woman's going to get her brain hijacked by this, and you're going to come home to her getting triple teamed by the neighbors because, it was a fantasy, then 10 things to do before you die. Get smashed by 3 husbands in the neighborhood. TikTok said so. It's crazy, bro. I'm just saying, obviously, that's an insane hypothetical. We're just laughing at the situation. But your woman can be persuaded through TikTok to end her marriage, to get a divorce, that the grass is greener on the other side, and that she should be free, and inject some fake emotion into her brain and makes her feel a certain way, that she starts self-affirming through all the TikToks in her daily life, and then your marriage is destroyed. I'm just saying. So yeah, and Steven Crowder, my bad, brother. Keep going.
And yeah, she wanted a divorce. Who wouldn't want a divorce? And by the way, I just want to make clear, in that case, I wouldn't say that it's a no-fault divorce. It seems like there's some evidence indicating that that relationship was not a good one, potentially a very abusive one. And I hope that, she's able to part ways with him and not have to deal with him ever again.
You see how they build the narrative?
Unfortunately, they have children together, but it is what it is. Now, here's Senator J.D. Vance talking about increasing divorce rates back in 2020.
And this is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is this idea that these marriages were fundamentally, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy. And so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear, that's going to make people happier in the long term. And maybe it worked out for the moms and dads, though I'm skeptical, but it really didn't work out for the kids of those marriages. And I think that's what all of us should be honest about, is we've run this experiment in real time, and what we have is a lot of very, very real family dysfunction that's making our kids unhappy.
There are a lot of myths about the divorce rate in America, and it's enraging.
Here we go.
Because it just persists, and no one ever really looks into it. So let's talk about what divorce in America really looks like.
Here's the liberal point of view.
There was a period of time where divorces experienced a spike. So the divorce rate in the United States increased significantly from 1960, when it was 9.2 per 1,000 married women, to 22.6 in 1980.
And here's how they twist the stats. How many people were getting married in 1960 out of 100 versus how many people are getting married right now in 2022 out of 100. This is how they twist the stats. We're hardly getting married at all anymore. And of those hardly getting married, the stats are still horrible. The stats are still at 14.5. Not much of a fucking improvement when the marriage rates have been cut by over half, and single parent household has exploded.
80. But by 2022, the rate had fallen to 14.5. Now, there's a reason for that. And it's because of the fact that, people waited longer to get married. I think that has a lot to do with it. So you don't get married when you're super young and you don't even know who you are yet. I think that had something to do with it. But the reason why there was that spike in divorces is because many of those marriages were in fact violent. There was domestic abuse within those marriages. And suddenly you have a situation in which women felt empowered to leave an abusive marriage. So before 1969, when California Republican Governor Ronald Reagan approved the country's first no-fault divorce law, yeah, that Ronald Reagan, he did that, women were often forced to stay in abusive marriages. Between 1976 and 1985, states that passed the laws saw their domestic violence rates against men and women fall by about 30%. The number of women murdered by an intimate partner declined by 10%, and female suicide rates also declined by 8 to 16%. And this impacted children as well, not in a negative way, in a positive way, because they're no longer stuck in a household where they have parents engaging in domestic violence, obviously. Kimberly Well, who's a professor at the University of Baltimore School of Law, says that without such laws...
And then I'll tell you, look, while the national marriage rates have continuously fluctuated between 1890 and 1960 with peaks and troughs in between, there has been a consistent decline since the 70s. Isn't it funny how she's talking about those laws being passed? It says, whereas the marriage rate in 1970 stood at 76.5%, today, that rate has more than halved, down to a paltry 31%. Only 31% of people are getting married today. And of the 31%, 14.5 of them are getting divorced. U.S. marriage rate has declined 60% since 1970. Pay attention how they twist the statistics, build the narratives, and propagandize their viewers. And then they'll go home after watching this video and go, conservatards. They don't know shit. They're restricting my right to no-fault divorce. If I want to leave, I'll leave when I want with no consequences. Who's most of the liberal base? Women. Of course. No shit. This is the message they send out.
Meaning the ability to have a no-fault divorce. It's hard to prove anything in court relating to a family because you don't have any witnesses. It's very difficult to get evidence to show abuse of children. How do you do it? Do you put kids on the stand? And there were also huge implications for the economic well-being of wives, many of whom stayed home and didn't make money on their own. If they could not prove that their husband had been abusive or persuade him to grant a divorce, they would not be able to take any assets from that marriage or remarry. And that's according to a study that was published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics. But some people in the alleged Party for Personal Freedom, which is hilarious to me considering what they're trying to do here, basically want to go back to the Dark Ages. And they want to go back
oh my God, medieval times. Off with his head. Grab the guillotine, sir. She is a witch. What are you talking about, the Dark Ages, you turd? You live in a society where you have just as much, if not more, freedoms than men do. You're pushed through the door at the expense of men. Are you kidding me? Is this really how they're Man, TYT has fallen. I remember watching them back in the early days when they were actually decent. Now it's just a mouthpiece for the mainstream. Unbelievable. Boys, get a passport, get out of the West. This is what people are consuming in the West. You'll find happiness outside, internationally, with traditional women, women who are super fit, friendly, feminine, welcomes you, builds a home with you, appreciates all the hard work you do, understands the value of a man, doesn't think strong, independent, doesn't think about divorcing, grew up in a more stable society, nothing extreme. No corporatist, socialist hellhole that America has turned into where it's profits over people, and you will find your happiness. I'm telling you, it exists. Not just for me personally, but you'll find it. Look at all the Passport Bro videos. Look at all the men going overseas and finding women easily, getting married and having children and sustaining themselves easily. Your dollar goes 10 times further overseas easily. Instead of surviving, you are now thriving and living easily. You're no longer a corporate cuck slave, and you get to live your life and see your family blossom, and you get to cherish all the things you have easily. And these people will tell you here, under the system that we have, that's designed to squeeze every dollar out of a man, that this is the best system we have, that you should stay here, that you should get in a no-fault divorce marriage, that it's actually hurting women to get rid of no-fault divorce marriage. They never talk about how it's affecting men, and it's mostly men that get affected by no-fault divorces because it's mostly men initiating the divorces. 80% of women, college educated, are divorcing the men. 80% initiated by the women. Women are taking advantage of no-fault divorces. Go overseas where the laws are much better, are in your favor, are far more logical and rationally made when it comes to marriages. The one in Romania says from what I've heard and been told to me multiple times, you know who gets the kids? The parent who has the highest income. Do you know what the divorce rate in Romania is? It's like 22%. Everywhere all around Europe, besides some of the other conservative nations, it's like 70, 60, 80, 90 in like Portugal or Spain, one of those two when we were looking at the rates. There's a reason. When you apply penalties to marriage and don't give the party that breaks the contract any leeway, people tend to not break the contract. And when people tend to get married, if they ever do, it's taken far more serious. Therefore, the contract is broken less and less. So yes, for those that are wondering, Bo, how's it going overseas? Well, if you're talking this much about this, and if you're saying it's so great, well, where's yours? Blah, blah, blah. I'm happy. I'm chilling. I'm going to the beaches. I'm enjoying my vacation. I'm in beautiful countries. It's cheap as hell. Cost of living is crazy. I can eat out every single day. Ubers cost a couple of dollars. Food is always fresh. There's no chemicals trying to kill me. Weather's amazing. There's no crime. I can walk at 4 a.m. Don't got to worry about getting stabbed, robbed, murdered. People aren't angry. Everything is clean. There's no homeless encampments everywhere. There's no one taking a shit in the middle of the street. There's no one injecting themselves with the latest whatever drug, like on the streets of San Francisco and shit, LA, any big city in America. It's insane, dude. Life overseas is a shock. And people wonder why when an American gets a taste for life overseas, already they're thinking of how to make this a permanent thing. Because we've been all sold a lie. America's the greatest place on earth. America is this, blah, blah, blah. It was 100 years ago. Yeah, you were way ahead of everybody else. Dude, the world has caught up. Your government doesn't care about you. They spend your tax money on frivolous shit. They do insider trading. Your bridges are crumbling. Your roads are shit and full of potholes. Your housing, shit, it doesn't even exist. They've sold off the market to private entities. BlackRock buying every home you've ever wanted to move into and then renting it out for you for double the price. Your groceries increasing. Gas increasing. Wages decreasing. Stagnating. Less benefits. College loans absolutely balloon. Can't discharge them. Jobs not available. H-1B visa, if you're in a specialized job, give it to the dude overseas. Why? Because he's cheaper. Made in America used to mean something. The American dream used to mean something. Now it's just hanging on to what has been while the empire slowly degrades, continues to decline, and you're told to be a real man and partake in this degenerate system that's headed for inevitable failure unless we somehow right this ship. And we're not going to right this ship with geriatric morons at the helm who hardly know where they are. And this goes for both Team Red and Team Blue, because the ship has been taking on water since Team Red and Team Blue have been manning all the masts. That's the problem. Kick these fuckers overboard and replace them with everyday, common, hard-working Americans that know what it's like to live in the real world and see what the real day-to-day problems are of surviving in the modern corporate American society today. Maybe then we'll fix this shit. Until then, I don't care what comes out of any politician's mouth who's never had to work a normal job their entire fucking lives. Billionaires and career politicians can blow me.
Era where no-fault divorces were not allowed, where they were banned. Republican lawmakers have discussed increasing restrictions on no-fault marriage law, no-fault marriage.
Come on, get it
laws,
together, Anna.
Eliminating them entirely in Louisiana, in Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas. In January, for instance, the Oklahoma State Senator, Dusty Devers.
Dusty?
It's a fun name, I guess. But he's a far-right Christian pastor who describes himself as an abortion abolitionist, introduced a bill that would eliminate no-fault divorces in his state. Devers wrote last year in a Christian publication that making divorce too easy causes social upheaval, unfettered dishonesty. Let's pause for a second. You want to talk about unfettered dishonesty?
No, Anna, don't pause, because he had a point. It causes social upheaval, unfettered dishonesty, lawlessness, violence towards women, war on men, and expendability of children. To devalue marriage is to devalue the family, is to undermine the foundation of a thriving society. That's a far-right take, guys. Listen, that's a far-right extremist take to want to empower the sanctity of marriage, to empower family, to build a thriving society. No, the libtards will tell you, go back to hedonism, materialism. Absolutely don't have any accountability for your actions. You should be freely, willy-nilly, getting married, getting divorced, having kids out of wedlock, blah, 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 destroying society and its whole fabric morally. All for the self. Me. And look at the greedy society we're in today and why it's turned so shit. We have no sense of community.
Let's pause for a second. You want to talk about unfettered dishonesty?
Here we go.
What do you think people do when they're in an unhappy marriage and they can't get out of it? You think they're faithful to one another? You think they're honest with one another? You don't think they might want to live double lives because they're stuck in an unhappy marriage by force thanks to the state? Let me continue, though. Lawlessness, violence toward women. How laughable is this? War on men.
Laughable.
And expendability of children. To devalue marriage is to devalue the family, is to undermine the foundation of a thriving society. Unfortunately, this guy's not alone. There are others who feel this way. In 2022, the Republican Party of Texas added this language to its platform. We urge the legislature to rescind unilateral no-fault divorce laws to support covenant marriage and to pass legislation extending the period of time in which a divorce may occur to 6 months after the date of filing for divorce.
Excellent.
Louisiana Republicans have workshopped a similar proposal, and the Nebraska GOP writes on its website that no-fault divorce should only be accessible to couples without children.
Excellent.
I don't understand how children living in a household with parents who can't stand each other and who do not get along is good for the children. It is not good for the children.
Why don't you talk about the 1 in 3 kids being born out of wedlock in single parent homes where the daddy government is the only daddy in their life? Why don't you talk about the fact that marriage rates have declined 60% in just since 1970? Why don't you talk about that even with these no-fault divorce laws you're coveting so much that the marriage rate continues to decline and is sharply declining still? Why don't you talk about the fact that men have sounded the alarm as to why they refuse to get married today, why they see it as a bad deal, and this is simply a step in the process to fix a lopsided contract enforced by the state. Why can't you hear the other side? War on men, laughable. As she lives in a gynocracy where she could point the finger at a man, accuse him with no proof of doing something, and all her accusations are taken seriously. God forbid the man is somewhat famous or has any fame in any capacity, is a public figure, because he will be forced to step down from his position, apologize for what he's done, can get blackmailed essentially by her in order to make this whole thing go away. His life altered permanently. And the story can be recanted later, and nobody gives a shit. The power of a woman. It exists. It happens all over society. Johnny Depp, and that was a famous, powerful, wealthy man.
At all. And if it's abusive, if it's an environment that is full of constant conflict,
if that's the environment you're in, why are you married in the first place? Do you see how their logic is circular? No-fault divorce makes it easier to get divorced. Makes it easier to not give a shit about marriage and its vows. Gets married to the wrong person, has a shitty household, needs no-fault divorce to get out of it. Circular. In a circle we go. No-fault divorces empowering shitty divorces. You get rid of no-fault divorces, you get rid of people marrying for all the wrong reasons.
It's actually incredibly destabilizing for children.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
understand how anyone can think this is a good idea. Federal lawmakers like J.D. Vance and House Speaker Mike Johnson, as well as former HUD Secretary Ben Carson, have also spoken out in favor of tightening divorce laws. At the Republican National Convention back in 2016, delegates considered adding language declaring children are made to be loved by both natural parents, united in marriage. Legal structures such as no-fault divorce, which divides families and empowers the state, should be replaced by a fault-based divorce.
Yes,
Again,
absolutely.
I really do think that the outcome of this, should these types of laws pass on a state level, it's very unlikely to happen on a federal level. But if they do pass on a state level, I would venture to say that marriage rates in those states will experience a decline. Because if you know that it's going to be more difficult to divorce your partner, should the marriage end up kind of falling apart, well, maybe you don't want to take that risk of getting married. And legislation banning no-fault divorce is, again, unlikely to ever pass on a national level. But if red states manage to enact these bans, couples in those states could be out of luck. Divorce laws generally include a residency requirement.
Yeah, and you'll see that most of the red states then will be the ones that are all going to get married, and the blue states won't, and they'll live under civil unions and continue not having kids and going rainbow-colored hair, identifying as 10 million things, and will breed themselves out of existence. And the only ones having kids will be those conservatives in the red states that believe in the sanctity of marriage and a nuclear family. Okay, so nature will solve this problem all on its own. Again, you're a grown woman. If you don't want to get married, you could just say no. Or you could be a real progressive, strong libtard and just say, I don't believe in marriage, Ted. We can just live under the same roof forever, whether your state is no fault or not. See how easy this problem has just been solved? You can't get out of marriage. Okay, simply don't get married. Cool story. Wow. Wow, incredible.
which would make it difficult for people to even cross state lines in order to get a divorce. And luckily, so far, none of these efforts have succeeded.
Luckily.
And Denise Lieberman, who's a professor at the university, at the Washington University
Whoa,
School of Law,
professors.
they will, saying, quote, I do believe that
Denise.
the train has left the station. I mean, we've had no-fault divorce now for 50 years, but I didn't think the Supreme Court would overturn Roe v. Wade, which we had for 50 years. So I suppose we will see. So no one knows for sure. No one has the ability to predict what's going to happen.
Yes, we know. Eventually, no-fault divorce will be nationwide. We have a conservative Supreme Court. They've already overturned something as massive as Roe v. Wade. Simply ruling on the fact that no contract can be entered with no fault is absurd. I think one day they will rule on this if it gets to the Supreme Court. It will become federal everywhere. It makes logical sense to end that. There is a larger and larger base of disgruntled men with a huge voting bloc and influence still. They may not be the economic drivers today, but their vote is still a vote, one for one. There are a lot of them and growing and being isolated and disgruntled and angry at the system and how it's not working for them at all and how disconnected they feel from everything. The few that are capable financially of leaving already have. The others are stuck here in a desperate hell, surviving day in and day out, working in dead-end jobs, dreaming of one day having a family. But reality slaps them down every day. Economically, it's just not viable. Yeah. You think this shit is all an accident? That Team Red is now pandering to this growing subset of men that's becoming the mainstream, that's becoming a large voting bloc of all age ranges? You think they would put me on a DHS list and everybody else that talks about this shit if it wasn't a problem?
Happen in these red states that seem to have lawmakers hell-bent on ending no-fault divorces. But I do think the story is something that needs to be emphasized, because while you have the Republican Party, speaking in a certain way, using certain rhetoric that appeals to ordinary American workers who are looking for an economic populist message, Republicans are still the same people who they've always been in regard to their so-called conservative values. And those conservative values tend to translate into the state having a say on the most intimate personal decisions you can make about your life and your household. I can't ever support that. I think this is incredibly gross, and I think it shows a certain level of insecurity, male insecurity, in the Republican
There it goes. There. We topped it with the cherry. It's male insecurity. Blame men. The shaming language came out. You see? Look, dude, look at her face. 1,000 cock stare. Angry, bitter, lonely, broken relationships, pumped and dumped. I'm a strong, independent woman with my own show, but my love life is a mess. I don't even know what her love life looks like, but this is not a happy woman. She does not have a man that she trusts by her side. Look at what happens when a woman goes modern.
This notion of having to control the decision-making of women in order to serve the best interest of men. That's the way this comes across. I don't think all conservative men are these insecure cowards. I do think...
Be a real man. Enter a no-fault divorce. Be a real simp for me.
In the Republican policymakers and lawmakers in this country.
Coward.
And that's a damn shame.
Coward. How dare you not foot the bill for my entire existence, coward.